Dzień dobry, and here I will change because my język obcy is not yet so far, and what I have to do here doesn't fit with what is in my Polish book as a learner of Polish language. Okay, my presentation I will make today will give you some insight in the reflections we made at the Institute of Research and Pedagogical Documentation in Switzerland. I was director of that institute until December last year, and the position was an interesting one because I was taken somewhere in between, a sandwich between the stakeholders, decision makers, which means 8 ministers of education of 8 cantons, and the research community who had to deal and cope with assessment issues. In 2006, we were indeed confronted with a political demand to ensure, on one hand, the scientific follow-up of the introduction of 2 foreign languages in lower primary school. We've seen with Eurydice the general tendency in Europe, which was also adopted in Switzerland. And on the other hand, put up a common assessment framework for the French-speaking cantons, including as well foreign languages and foreign language teaching. As the time is very limited, I will give you a very short introduction into the Swiss educational system, especially in regard to foreign language learning and teaching, and then show how far we were in advance, and finally get over to the assessment questions. So, some facts about Switzerland. Most of you have heard about Switzerland, and I hope some of you have stopped to mix up Switzerland with Sweden. It sounds very similar. At least Switzerland is a multilingual country, which doesn't mean that its population is plurilingual. Not at all. Learning foreign languages is therefore an essential task of the school. Now, as you can see, we have 4 ethnic groups: the German, which are the majorities, the French in the western part, the blue one here, and in the south we have some Ticinese, some Italian speaking confederates, and on the other side here we have this very particular, curious language, which is a Latin language called Romansch, which is talking in a few languages and which has become, over the years, a national language, but not, though, an official language. We have been talking before already about elements like the Belgians. They have a French, a German, and a Netherlands representative at Eurydice. In our country, the political organization of the cantons has been, I think, a way of avoiding this kind of majority-minority problems with language issues. And as a matter of fact, as you can see, Switzerland is organized in cantons. We have been talking about chocolate. I found some chocolate. Let me see if this goes. Yes, I found some chocolate. There are different chocolates, black chocolates, chocolate with this or that. In this little map of Switzerland, you have a chocolate form for every canton, and that means simply that we have 26 cantons, and these 26 cantons are, as a matter of fact, independent, sovereign states in educational matters. That means when you want to do something in Switzerland, you have to work with all these different states. You have to get these ministries together, and that was the job I was doing at this research institute. A canton can be very different. It can be Protestant, Catholic. It can have 15,000 inhabitants, as on the other edge 1.5 million inhabitants. So the issues are very different for all these cantons, as you will see later on. education, as I said, is a cantonal matter, even if there is a growing centralization going on. I don't yet manage. Oh, here we are. But at the same time, being aware of this kind of splittedness in these different cantons, there are certain organisms working with coordination, like the CDIP, which is the Conference of Directors of Public Instructions. That means a conference of ministers on the Swiss level, and you've got one on the French-speaking part and one of the German-speaking part, as you can see here. Foreign language teaching in Switzerland. First of all, I would like to tell you that Switzerland has been for many, many years confronted with that issue of foreign language teaching. It has therefore had a strong participation at the Council of Europe. But in regard to the objectives, in 2004, that means only 2 years after this European decision of, I think it was Barcelona or something like that, Switzerland continues in the same direction, deciding that 2 foreign languages have to be taught at primary school level, of which 1 national language at grade 5 or 7. That means at, let me see, 9 or 11 years. But, and here comes the typical Swiss phenomena of a compromise, cantons can choose the order of the language. And this was done in order to get a consensus between these 26 cantons, because some of these cantons decided to introduce English first as a foreign language, like Zurich and St. Gallen, which you have over here. So what you see actually is that on the left side of the picture, you've got the French-speaking part. There the problem is we have to know German because it's the language of the majority, and then comes English. And then you see a kind of security belt around these French-speaking parts. Those cantons have chosen to introduce first French, the language of neighborhood, and only as a second language English. And the other ones, the green ones, they choose for different reasons English as a first foreign language, and only afterwards French as a second one. And the 2 other cantons, which are TI, Ticino, and GR, Grison, those are cantons with 3 different languages, either because they have their minorities as the Grisons, or because the Ticino, in order to keep in contact with the rest of Switzerland, has to know German and Italian and English, of course, for the international level. Here we go. The construction of a coherent national curriculum is was also a big task we were confronted with. The whole question of foreign languages was integrated in this much larger redesign of the educational architecture in Switzerland, which had on one hand performance standards which were a kind of hybrid between the CEFR and PISA, and on the other side, a national curriculum which was only distinguished in terms of regional French-speaking and German-speaking particularities. There was, therefore, this centralization going on. At the same time, the cantons preserved their individualities, and they have chosen in the western part of German-speaking Switzerland 2 books, which you have here. Interesting is to look at the English one, New World, which is not the same that the French-speaking, is not the same that the French-speaking cantons would choose. They have chosen the English book more, even if the population and the objectives and the aim are the same. Another point I want to make here is that there were different approaches towards these books. Millefeuille, which is on your utmost left, has been written from the scratch according to the objectives of the curriculum, whereas the three other books have been chosen on the international book market, textbook market, which to a certain extent fit to what we are trying to do, but which needed certain certain adaptations. The work continues, actually. I give you just this indication, so we are in the middle somewhere in a process. I would like to emphasize that the Western-speaking cantons are the most advanced. But I have also to say that there are actually a few citizen initiatives in certain German-speaking cantons going on, where the citizens argue that one foreign language is enough, and we should not bother their kids with two languages. This is part of our famous direct democracy. You can take any decision on a political level, and the population with the initiative and referendum can throw them over. And we are waiting now here what is going on. The interesting point is that one of the Green cantons accepted one of these initiatives, which means they kick out the national language in their curriculum. And that means quite a few problems with the rest of the cantons. That brings us finally now to the assessment question. So we have been working on the French-speaking on the left and on the red one, the darker red one, which has French as a first foreign language. And if you recall the books which have been chosen, they had different origins, different editors. So a first problem to be resolved was to find a common framework for classroom evaluation, which we made with groups of teachers and didacticians and evaluators. Here for the German book, what is interesting is that the reference would be the colored part, and then you have different elements like the language activity which is concerned, the level concerned, the learning objectives, the communicational contexts, and a script of activity and corrections. The same thing has been developed exactly the same way for the English. I don't want to go through that grid. This grid is actually submitted for proposals to the politicians. We had also a few pitfalls, and I think the assessment question showed several difficulties. At the national level, we had to admit that there was a very bad timing between the elaboration of standards and the introduction of two foreign languages. That means that the standards for the foreign languages are not yet finished. What concerns the curriculum development, it was realized without dealing simultaneously the assessment question. And that was a major issue. This has been politically safer to get the curriculum through, but on the other hand, it means that we don't have we have common performance targets we try to meet, and the traditional teaching practices will strongly prevail over the targeted objectives of the reform. The existing practices will therefore determine the type and level of performance to get, and we can see already now in the different cantons that they are targeted on quite different levels, one compared to the other. In regard to the other existing elements, assessment tools. We had to report also that certain elements like the portfolino, etc., is simply not adopted by the teachers. It is adopted at a very, very low level. Very, very conscious teachers do it, but most of them consider it as being too time-consuming, too difficult to do. And if we take, for example, another evaluation tool like Lingua Level, which has been developed in regard with the CEFR, which gives evaluation items, etc. This has been only adopted in the German-speaking part of Switzerland. So, I think the teacher's fundamental mission is to teach and to create learning opportunities which makes learning possible. I found in the Cahier EPS a little picture of this teacher who tries to be creative and bring their pupils something. What happens now with the assessment is that the teacher has in the classroom itself a lot of informal assessments in the teaching and learning process. We've been discussing that this morning. It is the kind of feedback. It can be a simple sign. It can be a peer kind of assessment through students, which are part of the teaching learning process and which shouldn't actually be considered as an assessment. That's why I call it informal assessment. But the teacher has also to deliver at the end of each semester a certain amount of scores, and these scores he does it in the way with a normal classroom tests, project assessment, etc. And he has to be sure that he has 3 or 4 of them in order to calculate the level of the student at the end of the year. To this assessment in the classroom come school assessment. As we know, school assessment is absolutely justified because common tests through different classes allow more equity on school level. Teachers normally have a very good impression of how the different students position in the range of the population they teach. But if they compare it to another class, then there are major differences which can be observed. So in most of the schools we have these school assessments. On the cantonal level we have another type of assessment, which is an assessment of cantonal test where the objective is to certificate, to decide on the orientation of the pupils, to manage the flow of the students when they step over to the next class, etc. Also as such absolutely justified. But it is another assessment task which the teacher has to manage. And now on the regional level, that what we were working on was the demand coming up of making a further assessment which had to verify through regional tests the objectives of the curriculum if they are met, and certain cantons asked us to replace through that their cantonal tests. And finally, I had mentioned the national performance standards, and of course these national performance standards again come with an assessment, and this assessment itself has a very interesting function. It has the function to see if in the international setting Switzerland is doing well. It's comparable with the PISA tests, for example. So we have a large variety, and don't forget the cantons are sovereign. So the cantons can decide on the different forms of these assessments. I will show you that because I'm not a good friend of this machine here. when we were starting to think about these common tests, we started to analyze what happens in the different cantons. You've got the cantons on your left side, BE like Bern, VD like Vaud, GE like Geneva. And we discovered a widely scattered picture of assessment going on. The little tests which are in slide rows, I think it's rows, it looks a little bit like, yes. Those are tests which are even defined by law, by cantonal law. So you can't change them just from one day to another. You have to go through quite difficult work of getting majorities and introducing a political process. And then you see that you have on the blue side with the blue characters, you've got kind of formative assessment, some of which were just at disposal for the teachers. And on the green side, it's the same. And on the green side, you have summative assessment, which had to be done at a certain moment. All these different elements will define, of course, here that's the map. You see the red ones, they have summative assessment. The kind of lila ones have formative assessment, and the yellow one has no assessment. So we had to bring these politicians together because they wanted to have something common. It should have replaced these kind of tests, and the obstacles were very, very big. So came up the questions like what to assess. This is a first point we were, which is very tricky. We haven't discussed that in depth. The orientation of the CEFR talks about language competences. But what is a competence? And when you're confronted to the assessment issue and you have to assess a competence, you will find out that it's not easy at all. When do you have a competence fixed? When do you have, when can you say that the competency is partially achieved? And we made quite some research on this question without having very conclusive answers. You have, after that, to come on this question of summative, diagnostic, certificative, or formative assessment. The type of assessment you're choosing will decide on the moment of the assessment. If you have formative, you can't put it at the end, because otherwise you don't have any feedback. The question of frequency of assessment is an important question. It is linked to the fact that you have to think what frequency changes occur. In classroom, it's very often. If you have an overall system assessment, then every 3 years it's possible to have it, and you don't have major differences. And you have then the question of these confederal states, who will correct, who will aggregate the results, and who will give any information backwards, and then what is done afterwards. So, because of all these constraints, I tried to look at the assessment process a little bit differently. As a process of data generating in a knowledge production system. And I took the different actors, student, teachers, school leadership, that means the school directions, the cantonal administration, the intercantonal administrations, and wondered myself what type of information these people need. On one hand, the pupil, he needs information on his learning process, feedback. He wants comparison with the rest of the learning group. The teacher has to moderate this learning process, but he has also a certifying function, and he has to inform the parents about the advancement of their children. I remember myself as a father having been at one of these reunions, and the teacher said, well, your son is doing very good. He is progressing. And at the end, the results were not that, and he did not succeed into the next grade. So you see this kind of type of information you are taking out, extracting through assessment. If I take the school leadership, you have elements of teacher assessment, you have elements of accounting, the same on the cantonal administration and on the intercantonal administration. So, if you look at these different tests then, and these different information production elements, then you will find a certain amount of characteristics of these as assessment tools. There is, as I pointed out before, a strong link between the frequency of the assessment. You see the traditional assessment by the teacher is the most frequent one, whereas the external national testing is the less frequent one. And questions as level of standardization. More it is frequent, less it is standardized. More it is frequent, less it is complex in methodology of testing. And we have here a certain amount of links which are coming out very clearly. The difficulty is that politicians very often want to use any kind of information earned through assessment in order to make any kind of conclusion, which would be a very bad use of the assessment results. The question then is what can be generalized and which methodology is needed. If we consider the assessment data production, data access as such, it means for us that we have probably too many assessments in a school in the year, and rationalization is needed. The core business of a teacher is teaching, and let them continue teaching. And the assessment has its function, it is important, but it has to be shown up in a way that it supports that teaching. Therefore, compromises have to be found between the technical aspects, the standardization, and the practicability of that. We had that also from a financial point of view. The canton suddenly realized that it would cost much too much to have everywhere a very well developed assessment system put up. And then you have to think about which data is going to whom. If you have a classroom situation, where a teacher earns some insight in the advancement of a student, this data is not for a policymaker. The policymaker has nothing to do with that. It just brings confusion. And the function in the system of this assessment then should decide on the methodology we use. The IRT methodology, which you might say something about or have said something about, is interesting very much for system evaluation. It not always gives the needed information on a didactical level of the pedagogical interaction in the classroom. So, here we go. So only the function in the overall system decides on formative or summative assessment. And I will conclude, I think my time is over. She had already 0 minutes written on her paper. That let's hope that we manage this way by thinking about the function of the data produced through an assessment process. Let's hope that this way we find the necessary compromises to put assessment in its right place, the support for teaching and learning. Thank you. Dziękuję bardzo.